Hi, vinyl collectors. There's a flea market that's about a 20-minute drive from my house. At that flea market, there are 5 vendors that sell records. Every once in a while, I'll go out there, maybe once every 6 weeks, and just see what they have. I was out there this past weekend, and I'll show you some of the records that I picked up, as well as some of the records that I got on my previous visit. Just before I show you the LPs, I'll show you a little excerpt of a video I took with my smartphone as I walked around the flea market. You'll get some idea of the size of the collections that the vendors have for sale. Some of the booths are very small and others are fairly large.
Yellow one right there.
I know there's a real yellow one sitting across the road from our house. You want it? Well, there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was just temporary because they didn't have any spaces at the time.
Yeah.
And this and that closed down. They mostly came here, so there's no spaces left when I wanted to come back in.
So this past weekend at the flea market, I picked up a couple LPs by Phil Manzarella, who was the guitar player with Roxy Music. The first one, Wetton and Manzarella. This is pretty much like a generic 80s pressing. Nothing really stands out on this particular album. If you've watched my Roxy Music video, I think I showed Primitive Guitars, which was one of Phil's LPs he put out, and that was an outstanding album. Unfortunately, that last one there, really no standout tracks, nothing too impressive. The other one I picked up by him was this one. This one is a little bit better. Now, most of the songs on side one are vocals, I think by an individual named Tin Fin, and they don't come across that great. Pretty generic 80s pop stuff. But the second side has a little bit more instrumental, a little bit more experimental with the guitar, and is much better, a little bit closer to Primitive Guitars. This is the better of the two albums. Next one, Alice Cooper. I don't really collect Alice Cooper, but this particular vendor, the prices were fairly cheap. Most of his records are $10, and he was having a 2-for-1 sale. So buy one and get the second album at an equal or lesser value. If I see Alice Cooper cheap, I'll pick it up. But I'm not a huge collector of Alice Cooper. I've got maybe one or two other albums. So with that vendor, you buy one, get one free. So I just happened to pick this one up, Pete Shelley. This was a guy who I think was originally with Buzzcocks in the 80s and or even the 70s, and then went out on his own. He had one big club hit, I think, Homo Sapien. This is another album. This is, if you've heard Homo Sapien, this album pretty much sounds along the same vein. It's not bad. It's okay. Well, Susie and the Banshees. I used to hear their stuff back in the 80s, and at the time wasn't really a big fan or a collector, but recently, now if I see any Susie and the Banshees anywhere, I pick it up right away. I'm starting to really appreciate this group a lot more. Oh, on this album too is Trust in Me. Interesting. That was from the Jungle Book movie. Scarlett Johansson sings it at the end of the movie, and Susie and the Banshees do it on this one. This one's an interesting one I picked up. I have most of Blondie's stuff. I have nothing by Deborah Harry. I saw that one sitting in the flea market, and I thought, well, what the heck? I'll pick it up and just give it a listen. And if worst comes to worst, I always get a good cover. But it turns out that's a pretty good album. I really like it, and very upbeat, high energy album. Another one I picked up, Nina Hagen. Now, I've always been a big Nina Hagen fan, but I like her early stuff, the stuff she recorded in Germany with Spliff back in the 70s. When she came over to North America and hooked up with Giorgio Moroder and all that, her stuff is not nearly as good in my opinion. But still, if I see it cheap at the flea markets or in the vinyl store, if I haven't got it, I'll pick it up. These records here, they all vary between $5 and $10, and like I said, some vendors buy one, get one free. So none of the records are very expensive, of course, and none of them are really collectible either. At the same flea market a few weeks earlier, I visited there, and I picked up a few there. Now this one, a little bit psychedelic, Houston Fearless. This one has two good tracks, and it's the first track on side one, first track on side two. That is Not Fooling Me, and their rendition of Mr. Soul. And both those, the first tracks on both sides, very good. They have that sort of heavy 60s sound to it, almost like an Iron Butterfly sound or something. There's a couple tracks in there too that sort of have religious overtones to it, so I'm not sure if they're also doing sort of like Christian rock or something like that. This other one here, this was sort of a blind buy. I picked up, this is almost more like a pop psych, I guess. And I can't even hardly read the font. Algira Circus, Stone Pillow. I had never heard of this group. I saw it sitting there, and I thought, well, it looks kind of psychedelic. I think I'll pick up. And it is, but it's sort of a little bit more pop psyche than like a hard psych. But it's pretty good. I'm glad I got it. This one is the UK pressing. Of course, this is one that's very collectible on eBay when it's the uni pressing. This is the UK pressing. Again, a very good album. I really like this one. And again, this is more, again, in the psychedelic vein. So most of the vendors out there are pretty reasonable. Prices tend to be around $5, $10 for a lot of stuff. When they get collectible stuff in, they know it. They know what they've got, and they'll price accordingly. Unfortunately, there's one vendor out there, the vendor who has the best selection of stuff, also has the highest prices, and recently his prices have gone way too high, and I don't see how he can sell anything. And just as an example to show you, I bought this album at a retail store that sells new and used vinyl. And I picked this up, and I bought this last week at a store, and I paid $4 for it. And this vendor at the flea market had the same album and was asking $30 for it. So clearly his prices are way too high. And it's unfortunate because he does have some pretty good psychedelic stuff in there, but he's asking like $50, $60 for these records. And these are records that on eBay would go for like 15 or 20. Anyway, that's what I picked up at the flea market on the last couple trips. So as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.